Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Paranormal Beliefs. I'm joined once again by Justin Villarreal.
Hello.
There he is, the man himself. Steve Janier comes back from last week.
Howdy.
Howdy, there he is. But also this evening we're joined by Alex Rodini.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. And we're going to continue our conversation on paranormal beliefs. Now, when we finished up part 2 in the last edition of this podcast, we were talking about how crazy Steve and Justin were in the past of going alone, solo, to supposedly haunted locations.
I can vouch for Steve's insanity.
And well, it's funny. Well, Alex, how did you get involved in this? Did you do that? Did you go out alone also? I mean, I'm sensing a trend here.
Not necessarily alone, but I mean, I've gone out with friends, but I have ventured off when we've gone to locations on my own. But never, I don't think I've ever gone by myself.
Solo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was completely when they mentioned that on the last show, I was blown away by that. To think that you would go out in the middle of the night completely on your own to some deserted area. Now, don't get me wrong, the thing that freaked me out about it was not the kind of paranormal aspect, right? I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
The thing that freaked me out is that you're going to some location where, you know, there could be wild animals, there could be homeless people, there could be drug addicts, there could be crazy axe murderers,
occult covens and whatnot.
Exactly.
But you know what
all
I
that
ran
stuff.
into?
That's all
really?
trumped. That's all trumped. Okay, that's all trumped when it's all you not worried about, but all you're thinking about is the high of it.
Right.
Yeah, for the most part.
The sodomites.
Oh,
I mean,
That's probably up my alley.
Justin, when you went out, I mean, what was your train of thought when you went to some of these locations by yourself?
Yeah, it was pretty much, for the most part, it was pretty much that I'm here. I'm at this place that I've read about. I got here. I found the place. I get more excited when it's like, it's these weird directions and you kind of got to put it all together. So it was kind of really being there and finding the place. But the rush was probably being by myself and not knowing the uncertainty of things. There's part of that, but it was more or less finding these places. So
when you were, this is to Justin and Steve, when you would go out solo, you'd park your car somewhere, then you'd walk to the location, whether that be a cemetery or an old building or, insert supposedly haunted place here. And you'd go in there, you start investigating. At what point did you kind of draw the line in the sand where you're like, okay, I'm leaving now, I'm done?
I mean, for me, it was depending on, what I got within a time frame, and that really wasn't given. It was just, if I was there for an hour, maybe more, that would be about it. And I wouldn't be at too many places for too much longer than that, for the most part.
So about an hour. Does that sound about the same for you, Steve?
Well, I could give you an example if you want.
Sure, let's hear it.
I remember visiting an old pioneer cemetery that I used to love going to and doing some audio work. And I remember going there, it'd always be late at night when it's very quiet because this was in the middle of nowhere. And I would stay there until I could hear the coyotes in the distance. And then when you heard the coyotes getting closer and closer and closer, you're like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to hit my car. I'm gone. So
you'd wait till the animals get close.
Yeah. So generally maybe, anywhere from a half an hour to so on.
But it wouldn't be, I'm going to stay here until I get too scared or too nervous. Did that ever happen?
No.
Wow.
I mean, there would be strange things that would happen the odd time. And of course, most of the time, very explainable. But when you're by yourself, it didn't matter about explaining it. It's happening. You're like, okay, that was kind of freaky. But it was never to me, it was never to the point where I'm, look at, run, dude, run.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah.
It
to
was
get out
never
of
that.
there.
It was never like that. No.
Let me bring in Alex, because Alex is with us for a limited time this evening, and the subject here is paranormal belief. You know, how did you get involved in this subject, and what hooked you? So, Alex, what was your earliest recollection of being, moving into this arena, and what dragged you into the world of the paranormal? You know, as far as not only a belief system, but a hobby, or you got hooked, right? What was that?
I've always had an interest in the weird and the strange, even as a child. But I guess what really hooked me, more or less, was when the night my father passed away. And I've mentioned this on the show that Steve and I do a few times, but for the sake of your listeners, what happened was we knew my dad was passing away. He had terminal cancer, but we didn't know what day it was going to be. The doctors told us it could be days, weeks, or months, right? So the night that he passed, I was working the late shift, and right after work, which was around 10 p.m., I got off. I went straight down to the hospital. I had spoken to my mom before that, and she had told me that his kidneys had started failing, so I knew it was any day at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Went down to go see him. He was half in and out because of, I was doped up on morphine. And that day, I just, I decided to go down to the chapel at the hospital and just say, you know what, just take him. Just because I didn't want him to see him suffer. But again, it was one of those things, like, I didn't know it was going to be that night. When I got home that night, I tried to go to sleep, and I kept tossing and turning and looking at the clock. And around 2:30 in the morning, the last time I checked, is when I started to finally phase out into sleep. And I was in that state where you're half in and out. Mm-hmm. And in that state is when I sort of had this, I guess, for lack of a better term, vision, if or even dream, whatever you want to call it, where it was a hazy background, a gray hazy background. And I saw my dad waving at me and smiling, and then he just sort of disappeared. And then about maybe 5 minutes later, it was my sister called from the hospital just to let us know that he had passed. So since that day, I guess that sort of cemented it. But my interest in the paranormal stemmed from even before that. I've always had an interest in the weird and the strange.
That's like very similar to my experience. I had a dream the night before he died. He died in a car accident, and we got a phone call probably about a half a day later. And that was pretty much what cemented it for me.
Yeah.
Wow. And what got you into? I mean, there's lots of people that have strange experiences and interests. But what got you to the point where you were an active participant, where you took it to the level where you would actually go and try and seek out these experiences?
Yeah, it was that instance when my dad passed, because my whole purpose after that was trying to, for my own sake, establish a sort of confirmation that there is something beyond our physical life. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, you have to try to sort of breach that communication with the other side, if there is, in fact, another side. Mm-hmm. So in order to do it, you have to sort of become involved and immersed in this sort of field and life, just to try to reach and attain that sort of communication by any means that's available to you. This is also another reason why I keep trying to tell asking everybody to do a seance with me, and no one wants to do it, right? Especially not my wife. She'll kill me if I try to do one here at home. But nevertheless,
once I make it up there, we'll be doing all sorts of experiments.
Hey, it's like I said, man. I have 3 Ouija boards. We can do it easily.
I've experienced with them.
Well, that brings up an excellent continuation of this kind of questioning. Then, so seances and contacting the other side. It sounds like that most of us, if maybe even all of us, have dabbled or dipped our toes into that water to mm-hmm. see what may or may not happen. So let me start with Justin. Justin, have you done this? And tell me how you got into it and what became of it.
I think it was overall just the start of looking into possibilities and after I did that first investigation in Chicago when I was about 16, 17, it just kind of was like, okay, I'm in this now, you know. And that particular investigation was the first investigation. And just to sum it up real quick, we were in an apartment building in Chicago. I believe it was off of Belmont, close to the alley. So if you ever heard of the alley, we weren't that far away from there. And it was connected to an old, or I think it was still partially connected to a church, but the apartment building side was renovated for apartment use. So the first time there, I did a cleansing. I had one of the investigators, Jeff Meyer. He did a bit of an experiment with tarot cards, trying to get information through that way. The person who brought me on, Jamie Clemens, he was kind of, I guess you can consider him, we'll just say pagan, just that'd be a safer term.
Okay.
He was a bit pagan, but not necessarily that he involved those beliefs in the investigation, but just that was his stance about things. And two people that I brought with me, which would be considered Wiccan, and one would be considered, Wiccan medium. So it was the first time I ever experienced any of that. The first time I ever felt, anomalous cold spots. And just from that point on, seeing all of that. And the funny story about that, when we were doing a cleansing, apparently one of the spirits that were there were female, and she thought I was attractive, and it was following me around apparently. But I had to tell her to go, and since I was like, I'm young and I'm already in debt. I forgot what was I doing. I was like, I'm already in debt, and you don't want to get involved with me. So that's how I ended that. And just from that point, I was like, okay, it was just like a conglomerate, of all sorts of beliefs and stuff. So from that point on was just, let's experiment this. And slowly I started to get away from the church. As I mentioned before, I was kind of in the path to become a youth pastor. So the church I was involved with, I slowly, and for other reasons, was stepping back. And I guess from that point, just kind of initiated me into those things, especially since the people I was involved with kind of had alternative beliefs as well. So I wanted to look into those. And since I've already stepped the bounds of my own Christian beliefs, what's really out there? And that was really the push. And I've Ouija boards, pendulums, rituals, you name it, black mirrors. I've candle magic. I've tried most of it.
And was there results, or were they dismissed?
For the most part, I would say no, but the most I've gotten out of anything was an experience with the Ouija board, where one night, which I still have it, glow in the dark, Parker Brothers Ouija board. I was the first time moving out of my house. I was about 18 years old, and I had an apartment with two roommates. And one night we came home, and they decided, let's play the Ouija board. And it was a little weird, but what kind of tipped it off was I was asking it questions that only I would know, and at that time, that's still kind of a bit of a false positive when you're looking at things. But at least for me, I knew the answer to these questions compared to what my two roommates would. And the Ouija board spelled out my grandfather, Ignacio was his name, Ignacio Naya. And it spelt it out, and that wasn't the only thing. That was what initiated kind of to continue it a little bit. And there was a few other things. I think one that I remember was a Bible verse that came out, and I forget what the Bible verse was, but it was an interesting experience that happened. And I tried it again, and nothing has totally happened since. But I think for the most part, and it's probably a longer discussion, when I delved into magic, if that's what I can call it, that's when I seen some interesting things from that. So, and that coincides with a little bit of the things that we do talk about, but it's a very much complex type of thing to really.
No, I definitely want to go down that path and discuss that with you. But let's put that on the back burner for now, and then we'll come back to it. But Steve, how about you? As far as seances, as Alex mentioned earlier, have you dabbled or partook in any of that?
Absolutely. It started off with my sonic screwdriver.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was young, obviously I was fascinated with the Ouija board, and I, had to know more about, does this thing work? And I was skeptical. I mean, I wanted to believe it did work. And the many times that we did it when we were kids and into our teens and stuff like that, nothing really ever happened that would make me think that this was actually working, if you will.
Right.
But, I was always fascinated with the process. And, I would go into, not so much as far into it as Justin did. And Alex, he'll tell you, he's done a lot more than I have. In fact, the guy's got one of my Ouija boards, I think.
Yeah, you gave it to me.
I know.
So haunted. Think about that.
My wife would never let me have one in here.
I actually ran into that too.
Don't you bring that into this house?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the same issue with my wife also with the Ouija board. I bought one because for me the Ouija board was it was a fascinating thing because growing up in the UK, Ouija board, and this sounds, me even saying these words right now, it sounds insane.
Yeah.
But growing up in the UK, Ouija boards were illegal.
Geez.
Well, they've always had a stigma, and not so much being illegal, but they always had, they were always taboo, if you will.
You could not buy anywhere, right? You couldn't go into a toy store. They weren't for sale anywhere, right? There was nowhere where you could get these things, and as we mentioned on the last show, I was a young kid fascinated by horror movies and watching, the From Beyond the Grave and all these great classic movies where they would have seances, and the Ouija board was a major component. But you could not buy one. Even if you saved up your pocket money and you wanted to buy one, there was there was none to buy. So what we did was we would make our own.
Yeah, I made one too. Yeah,
we would make our own. So me and some of my friends, when we were kids, we would get like a Scrabble board and flip it over. And we'd lay out all the alphabet and the yes and the no. Then we'd get like a wine glass from, our parents' liquor cabinet or whatever. And we'd use the wine glass as the planchette. And we'd use that to get around the whole thing. You couldn't buy these things. And when I moved to the United States, I remember the day vividly. This must have been in the mid-'90s. And we went to Toys R Us. And we're walking down the aisle of Toys R Us, and they had Monopoly and Risk and all these board games, the standard board games. And I'm walking along, and all of a sudden, I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me!" There's a Ouija board there for like $14, and Parker Brothers, and I was like, my mind, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. So I immediately bought one.
Let me guess, you grabbed a Clockwork Orange as well?
Yeah, that was banned too for a while. Yeah, Clockwork Orange.
Exactly.
And I immediately bought the Ouija board, and took it home. And my wife at the time, I say my wife at the time, I'm still married to the same woman. It's not like I'm just my second wife, but she was like, "What the hell? You can't bring that in here." And I'm like, "It's fine. It's a piece of cardboard. What do you care? Get out of here. It's nonsense." And and I would use it for a little while. And I remember my nephew came over, and I was playing it with him. And after a while, it just ended up just stored away, and it's still stored away somewhere. It's probably in storage, and we never used it since. But it was a major cultural thing for me.
Yeah.
For all those years as a kid, where this thing was just like this mystical, magical thing that you've never ever seen a real one.
Yeah.
In the flesh, so to speak, and then suddenly to walk into a toy store and there's like there's a stack of 30 of them in a shelf, and you're like, it blows your mind. It's amazing.
Mine was bought as a Spencer's gift. I don't know if you guys have that anywhere, but
I remember Spencer's.
That's where mine was.
Yeah. But it's funny you should say that. Yeah, Clockwork Orange was banned, along with The Exorcist was banned in the UK. There's a bunch of movies. When we went through the video nasty phase.
Video nasties.
In the early to mid 80s in the UK. There's like an underground movie, Yeah. And I remember I got a hold of a copy of The Exorcist in about 1984, 85 on VHS. And it was like I was the king, Hey, I got this copy. I got this copy of this movie. And it's just it's not a big deal, but it's it's so weird, that the government in its open quotes wisdom close quotes decided to ban all of these great movies. And it just added an extra layer of, I got to see this. I mean, if these movies were just plainly available for anyone, you'd be like, yeah, I don't give a shit about that movie because I got to see this movie. It's banned. You get that extra layer of fascination on it.
There's been a lot of talk with, rituals and Ouija board. I mean, the one thing that I was interested in, and I sort of kind of went in that direction for a little bit, is the Viking runes, if you will.
Oh, the runes, yeah.
I found that very fascinating, and of course, coming from a United background, not really, highly religious, but I mean, still, this was, that's paganism, if you will.
Yeah.
I found it fascinating, and I had to know more. And without the internet, it was really tough to find stuff about ruins, except for in books.
Yep.
But I managed to.
We had to go to libraries.
Yes, to libraries, to libraries, and read books on ruins,
picking up historical books and everything, and everything else.
Ruins. Do you remember there was a movie, The Night of the Demon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is
it's like a trilogy, actually.
And then there was a remake in 1979.
Yeah.
In the UK called The Casting of the Runes.
Yeah.
Which was based on the original story that Night of the Demon was based on.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that as a kid and being completely fascinated by that.
It's a fascinating thing because I mean, most people only know about the word runes, but there are several different variations of if you will, and I don't want to say Viking, but I mean Scandinavian runes. There's several. I believe there's in total 5 different variations, and the variations are from basically when they started about I believe it was 150 AD, something like that.
Wow.
And then obviously it changed because Christianity was introduced into a lot of Scandinavia. And it basically changed the way, a lot of them thought.
I think you're being kind by using the word introduced.
Yeah, exactly. Force the plan, yes.
With an iron fist, an iron cross.
But I guess it would kind of it depends on where. I mean, for instance, Iceland, it was introduced. Iceland it was never really forced upon.
Yeah.
I mean, because they've always Iceland, I think, is probably the last stand, if you will, of
well, it was basically the Roman conquering and the Roman occupation of Europe that changed everything with the pagans and the like, with the Emperor Constantine when he converted to Christianity, and then aligned the Christian dates with the pagan dates.
Yep.
To kind of get the local populace to be on board with the belief system.
But I do believe, I think, was that the Romans were before or slightly?
They were before, during, and after.
Yeah, but I mean, when the Vikings, for instance, the Viking raids of the UK, for instance.
That was before the Romans.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
Are you sure? Because they had
because
already had converted to Christianity.
The Romans invaded the UK.
Yeah.
And they took over pretty much everywhere except Scotland.
Exactly. And when the Vikings did their raids, they had already been indoctrinated by Christianity, Catholicism.
Dude, you might be right. I don't think you are, but you might be.
I'm almost positive of that.
Yeah. I know listeners write in and either correct myself
Double check
or correct me or Steve because one of us is wrong. I don't know which. One of us is. Yeah, but yeah, I mean the Christian influence has been felt the world over, right? It's spread throughout the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that why you had the bans in the UK for some of these movies? Was that a Christian influence, or what was that?
It might have been. It probably was. Yeah, there was a very strong Christian ethic in the UK right up until the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
I think now in the UK, I think about 45%, maybe not quite 50%, but about maybe 45 to 48% of the population of the UK are atheist.
Yeah, it seems to be a growing. Yeah,
it's a very large atheist population, and Christianity seems to be waning. It seems to be on the downturn.
Yeah, it's like that everywhere, right?
It is waning, and that's thanks to, I guess, the internet and science and everything else that's come about in the past.
There's been because in Europe there's been such a huge influx of immigrants from the Middle East. Islam is starting to grow because they've left the Middle East and moved into Western Europe and set up home there.
So is Wicca, though. Wicca is growing as well.
It is. You
know, I think they said in the U.S. it's one of the fastest growing religions in the U.S.
It's accessible. It's it's amalgamation of many different beliefs, to be honest with you, but it's an easy access to everything else. That's kind of how I kind of got into those types of beliefs, was through Wicca originally, kind of getting into the earth spirits and stuff like that, and eventually it grew from there. It's like a jumping base if you want to get into that.
So we've mentioned a lot of religions and belief systems. So personally, speaking from myself, even though I was raised in a Christian culture, I've never ever been religious.
Nor me.
I've always thought it was a little silly, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And when I say a little silly, I'm not just talking about Christianity. I'm talking about all religions.
Of course.
I've always felt it was like, wishful thinking, pie in the sky, let's all pretend, and so on. And that's just me. I've always felt that way.
I agree. I'm pretty much the same way, I think.
Yeah.
I know. I don't think I know.
And I mean, for a while, for throughout my mid-teens to my early 20s, I was a rabid atheist.
Okay.
Like maybe even a radical atheist. I remember legitimately thinking that people who truly believed in religion, regardless of what religion it was, but people, not the people that give it lip service, that are not people who are culturally religious, right? Because most people are culturally religious, not really religious. They do it because it's part of their culture and so on. But the people who really, really believe it, who live and breathe it, I used to honestly think that those people were mentally ill.
Well, it's not being involved with it like I have. You can kind of guess maybe that's what's the biggest strength to that belief, is just people with the lack of something, and this is what they latch onto. And I think I felt kind of the same way when I was involved with it. I read the Bible. I would pray, and all the things they wanted you to do and what I would do, and I would even be worried about my actions, but in the back of my head, it was kind of questionable because given my own ancestral background, we didn't believe in Christianity originally. That came upon us, and it's more indigenous. So when I listened to my mom talk about our original, our ancestry, it kind of made me change a little bit on what that perspective is. And I don't know, it's kind of weird. Deep down, I was always into kind of esoteric type of stuff, and I just never really thought about it. I don't know what it was. It was just always embedded in there. So when I started looking at those things, it really kind of gave a contrast to those beliefs. And it really wasn't until getting involved in paranormal investigating that it kind of branched out into that. But being involved, watching how people react to certain things, people speaking in tongues, that was a little weird to me. I thought, well, maybe this is it. And I always like, well, how come I can't do it? And then one day I kind of did it. And they, was like, oh, we're all speaking in tongues. But then I brought it up to my pastor. I was like, I kind of just did that. He says, well, I mean, you can't just do that. I'm like, but I kind of did. And it, he never really, never really had an answer to me other than like, well, you're making it up kind of, so.
Right. But then again, they kind of all are.
Yeah, of course. You when you buy into those things that much, that's what makes it work. And it was from me questioning that, and of course, questioning my experiences early on, that kind of started breaking that away. And then realizing certain things in those beliefs, like divination in Christian belief is basically praying and talking to God and angels at times, really, which is not necessarily a Christian belief, it's more a Catholic belief. But those things exist, and I always thought, well, why would just the idea was helping me break. Why would God create such things if he didn't like it? If he created everything, just that philosophy of itself started eating itself when I started seeing the world before me. And I guess realistically, because of that, I really wasn't a total believer. I have it in me, but it wasn't where the point was like how easy I can get away from it as I did. And it's the truth. It was really how the operation of it is.
But to believe in stuff, I mean, that's very human,
of course,
right? I mean, human beings are preconditioned to believe in these kind of things. If there was a cataclysm that happened on Earth tomorrow, and it wiped away all of our science, all of our technology, all of our beliefs, all of our religions, everything went away. 1,000 years from now, there would still be religion.
Yeah.
But it would be completely different to the religions that exist today.
And it's been like that. That was another aspect when I started to really study history and noticing the difference in cultures and civilization. And noticing the timelines in that is really what broke it. It's like, okay, why is this, a popular belief for only, 3,000 years or so, while we've had all other cultures before that, and let alone other countries and, other histories that didn't really bring light to these particular things. And it was that in itself that kind of really broke it away on how do we believe? We got so many different beliefs around the world. And I was growing up in this one belief, and it was literally, it kind of is a little bit earth shattering to people who are not prepared to that. It took me a while to kind of put it all together. But, once you get through it, it's kind of a beautiful thing right after that, releasing all them dogmas. For sure. Yeah.
No, but I mean, people who are culturally religious, I'm totally comfortable around people like that. Because people who go to church on Sundays, and then you're like, well, why do you go to church? Well, that's what we always do. That's our culture. That's what we do. Okay, I'm cool with that. The people that make me uncomfortable, the people that truly 100% believe that it's real and that it's reality.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that make me think, fuck, what the hell is wrong with you? That kind of thing. And obviously there are a lot of people like that who truly, truly, truly believe it to be real.
And that is the basis of most of these claims that we even look into. Is it falls along those things. And I think it's just a search for something, one way or another.
it's a search for something bigger than yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And humans are very prone to, if they don't understand something, and they don't have the tools to understand it, they just make stuff up.
Yeah. Exactly. Fill it in the beliefs, make it a cult.
That's what people do. That's exactly what people do, right? If you witness something and you don't understand it, and you don't have the tools to understand it, then you just make it up.
Yeah. Well, we thought, a few thousand, somewhere around there for a while, bad teeth were demons. And at one point, believe it or not, they thought cavities were created by worms. That was, that was not, and that was, I think modern dentistry, as what we see it now, is like around 1600, 1700. So for a long time, they had these beliefs, literally demons in our mouths creating bad breath and worms rotting our teeth away.
Yeah.
And we fill in the blanks. It wasn't until later, even when was germs, that we found germs was the late 1800s before we validated that,
Right.
That whole time, people didn't believe in that. They thought,
well, back in the day when you would say, there's these things called bacteria that live on our skin and cause disease, people would be like, "Get the fuck! Are you crazy? There's no, you're out of your mind. That's great. It makes no sense. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of rationale.
Yeah.
But the thing that pulled me out of my rabid atheism was the paranormal.
Yeah. I could say that.
Right? Because if the paranormal didn't exist, and it does exist, if it didn't exist, I could be quite content being an atheist.
Of course.
Because it would make total sense.
Well, no matter what, I mean, even being involved in these two beliefs, it's just as crazy. Let's the Big Bang is just a theory. So let's, not people who listen don't get too crazy here on beliefs. But let's just say that was what it is. The Big Bang happened. And then let's just say God created man and whatnot. To me, those are both crazy ideas that we both came out of nothing in those aspects. So believing in any of that is just as crazy. We live in a world where we don't know, and we have to be open to those possibilities to what it is. But
the Big Bang is just a theory.
Of course, exactly. Yes. And
there's no. I mean, it's just a theory to explain
best
the
understanding
that we've witnessed.
Yeah,
we have all this evidence, and we're trying to figure out, well, where did all this come from? And the Big Bang is one of many theories to explain the evidence.
And it is. It's just understanding that we may have a multiverse is just as crazy as maybe God and angels existing. Though I will probably believe in the multiverse first, and I think that's what kind of changed my perspective, like you, because I got out of it. I started doing out of the religious, aspect of it, and basically was involved in investigation and paranormal research. And for a while, I wasn't getting the evidence and data that I was reading about, and all these things. So I'm like, what is this? And so I became basically somewhat nihilistic, in that aspect, atheistic. And it really wasn't until I understood or started to try to understand multiverse, quantum theory, stuff like that, that really brought me into that grounding of like merging, I guess, spirituality and hard science together, because there is parts of unknown in that. And it did help me back. One time I was literally just sitting there. I think I was on break, and I'm sitting outside taking my break, and I just kind of you don't really need hallucinogens to fill this or anything like that. You just need a moment to yourself. And I was just like, everything's connected. Like, it was just that. I just thought about that, and I realized the molecules. It just kind of came to me one day like that. And I was like, well, maybe that is the connection we're all talking about with God and whatnot. And I started kind of merging these ideas together, which made some sense because it's true in this hard science that we're connected. And it wasn't until that I kind of brought myself back, and I even took the time off from investigating because I'm like, there's nothing here. But then I got back in, had a different mind frame in a sense, and a different light to look at things. And it really did open a whole new world on how to handle all these claims, cases, and everything else just from that alone.
Steve, what are your thoughts on this? I know that you're kind of in line with me in many respects, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm atheist. I never was atheist. I don't think I went that far. And for some reason, I sound a little louder. I don't know why.
You're good here, man.
Okay. I don't know. I personally, I sat maybe close to being maybe Gnostic for a while.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that really didn't sit too comfortable for the longest time. I mean, it's really tough when you're thinking about religion and you sit there and and you sort of look at the paranormal. It's really hard to sort of dive into it without having the heavy influence that the Christian world has upon it. I mean, the way most people look at it from the Western sort of views is Catholicism, Christianity sort of aspect, and their approach to investigating and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's my problem. I literally can't stand that. It drives me insane that people will be stuck within that box, and nothing will ever come out of it. It's like a vicious circle.
So Alex has to leave in a moment, so let me just bring Alex in before he has to head for the hills. But what are your thoughts on this religious conversation, Alex?
I think it's BS, to be honest with you. But
in which regard?
Well, no, I mean, for me, I'm more of an agnostic, like what Steve was trying to say initially. But I neither believe or disbelieve. I try to go in it with an open mind.
Okay.
I know, obviously, because of my upbringing, because I was, born and raised in a Catholic family, I obviously have that more to lean on than anything else, and to go by. But nevertheless, I try as hard as I can not to let that influence my, decisions too much when it comes to the paranormal, just because we just literally don't know what it is that we're dealing with. Some of the claims that have been made in the paranormal sound Christian, some sound Islamic, some sound Buddhist, and so on and so forth. And that's more, in my mind, that's more of a perspective from the individual than anything else. So for me, I try not to let my upbringing influence what it could potentially be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cultural thing, though, right? I mean, depending on what part of the world you're born in and the culture you're immersed in, that bleeds into your belief system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As far as what religion or whatever the case may be, it's part of your indoctrination into being a human, right? It's bled into you from day one.
And that's what made me look into, for instance, how other cultures look at the paranormal. And, I touched base with a good friend of mine, Sharif, in Malaysia, who is in Singapore. And I had him on the show, and just listening to his perspective on the paranormal, if anybody knows anything about that part of the world and how they look at this stuff, they're very superstitious in their beliefs, and that reflects on how they investigate the paranormal. So
because the phenomena is universal.
Yes.
But depending on where you're born and what culture you're immersed in, that dictates how you translate the phenomena and how it affects you. The phenomena is the same everywhere. Yeah. But the way you perceive it is dictated by your belief system.
Exactly.
It's like when you see images in clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. So when a phenomenon occurs, you automatically rely on your upbringing to try to make sense of what's happening, and that's why it becomes more of a religious thing than anything else.
Yes.
Right.
But anyways, gentlemen, I got to get going. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on, Alex.
Not a problem.
Appreciate it.
All right, Alex. Take care, man.
Later.
Take
All
care.
right,
Have a
man.
good night.
Have a good one.
Take care. But that's a huge proponent. You know what I mean? I mean, when it doesn't matter where you are in this world. Like you said, there's a baseline. There is a common thread when it comes to the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
But the approach is entirely up to
It's cultural.
your beliefs, your religious standpoints, whatever.
It's a cultural response to the same phenomenon.
Exactly.
Right. And in order to get to the truth as to what's really going on, you have to kind of discard the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to try and move beyond your belief systems of, God and heaven and hell and or whatever belief system that's been ingrained in you since day one. You have to step beyond that and look at the phenomena as purely as possible, and that's not entirely possible because you can't completely switch off your perception of reality, right? Because because your culture it'll skew how you view reality.
For the most part, I mean, if you spend enough time within this, because for me, when I first did any of those things that were not Christian in a sense, there was that weird, am I doing something bad? After being involved, especially even investigating that one, I thought it was a bit because I was told, you're dealing with spirits and demons, and really I wasn't. I was just trying
work of the devil.
Yeah, it was at one point. This is but once you get past those thresholds, you start accommodating, to those, I guess, experiences, whatever that may be, or lack of at that time. Especially when you break away from those beliefs. After a while, that will filter out eventually, and I hope it does. To be honest with you, because for me, there might be that slight possibility that I might have Jesus in the back of my head or something like that. Very slight, but for the most part, I've pretty much taken those aspects out. It's been like that for a while, and I think after having that break for a little bit and kind of reassessing certain things, it helped with that, because I was like, well, I can't look at these things the same way, and especially dealing with a few cases at that time before I kind of took that break. These people believe I've been to a house where I would want to say they're Wiccan again, that all family, their mother, father, children, they were all Wiccan, and they believe in a certain way, and given what they understand as being Wiccan, they should have been able to handle, aspects of that themselves. But they get a hold of us, and we kind of figured out that, part of it was really her son she was stressed. The mother was stressed out by her son, and where she was experiencing certain things, they had actually I believe it was the bedroom, an electrical box, a fuse box in that bedroom. And I had my EMF reader out, and I was like, what is the possibility that maybe some of these experiences you're having are related to these high EMS within this bedroom?
Exactly. Exactly. I had a similar case. Exactly.
This is not the first time. A case that I did, I call it the doctor house, and there's the experiences they had, some of them are validating, but where they were having some of these experiences, there was an unshielded electrical box there in the basement. And they were claiming that they saw, I think it was a child, walk from that point, kind of just walk. You could turn around, you're doing something, and you see in that hallway where the box is that there was a child. I go in there in my EMF reader, doing what I do, not, and of course, in the back of my head, I'm like, it's a possibility that they're seeing what they're seeing. But at the base of it all, I'm trying to get data. I'm trying to validate these claims. And sure enough, bring EMF readers there, and these were some of the cheaper ones. They went off. They went off in that hallway. So it's a possibility that these people, among their own, stress and other things, and then add this on there, created that possible experience, or it inhibited it. It like charged it in a sense. I'm not, taking out the possibility that EMFs might charge areas in that sense.
Well, electromagnetic frequencies do induce hallucinations in people, right? I mean, they've done experiments where they put put the helmet on,
Yes.
and they zap your brain with all kinds of electromagnetic, and you start experiencing all kinds of spiritual / paranormal experience.
It all depends, and again, Justin, I know you'll probably agree. Low doses for long periods of time.
Yeah.
High doses for short periods of time.
Of course.
They relatively have a different sort of effect, but they sort of.
I have to just run to the restroom. I'll be right back.
No problem.
Yeah. It's just amazing. And you know what I wanted to get at, Justin? Let's face it. When we're dealing with the paranormal, we have to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people have said that. I've heard the phrase a million times, but you never see them step outside that box.
No.
And that's with me when I started to look into groups from around the world and how they approached their sort of, investigation or research of dealing with the paranormal. And obviously that led me to Sharif and his group there in Singapore. But I was fascinated by how level-headed Sharif was with his group, because he comes from a region that is highly superstitious.
Yeah, I believe he was skeptical himself, right? Wasn't it his basis?
He was very skeptical.
Yeah.
And you and I could sit there and go, oh, well, I'm kind of skeptical, with some of the stuff that he was bringing up, but still it didn't matter. Him himself was being very skeptical with the people that he had to deal with in the paranormal from where he was in, his part of the world, so to speak.
And I bet he goes through it because, that part is actually a mix of a lot of different religions, from Christianity, and then emerges, those things type of merge, but you kind of have to in that sense. For some reason, areas like that tend to have that more superstitious type. Even in Mexico, it's very superstitious, and a large amount believe in UFOs and stuff. So there's already, and actually in the Malaysia, Philippines, all that area,
okay, I'm back.
They tend to have those experiences a lot more than what I've noticed in America, in a sense, in certain other areas. I've seen a lot of UFOs in South America, Mexico, and the Philippines, parts of Asia, stuff like that, compared to some other areas. But that base is there that feeds, I guess, those beliefs as well, because there's obviously something going on one way or another when you look at that. Whatever it is, we don't really know, but for some reason,
it's interpretation, right? So let's just say that you fly to the Philippines, and you're out with some Filipino people, and you have a close encounter with a UFO.
Yeah.
And this ship comes down and it lands, and maybe they take you on board or whatever the case may be. Now, both you and the Filipino that you're with will agree that something very strange happened.
Yeah.
That something did come out of the sky and did come and take you on board. You'd both completely agree on that.
The interpretation is different.
But your interpretation on what it was and what happened would diverge pretty significantly, as far as the modus operandi of the craft and what the creatures were and where they came from. They would differ significantly based purely on your cultural perception of what you experienced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the experience would still be real.
I just want to throw out, Justin.
Yeah.
If you want to look into even Gareth, if you want to look into something fascinating, look into the Change Eye Hospital.
Change Eye Hospital.
Yeah, the Change Eye Hospital.
I've never heard of that.
It's now been torn down, but this place had so much phenomena going on there, and Sharif was able to investigate this place with his group, and it was just let me tell you, I would have loved to fly out there to check this place out.
This was where? Where was this? Where was this located?
Singapore and Malaysia, one of the two.
Singapore. Okay.
Change Eye. So change and I at the end. Change Eye Hospital.
Okay.
Phenomenal. The stuff he was telling me about this place and the stuff I read up on this place was just incredible.
Singapore.
Yeah.
Like some major phenomenon.
Yeah. So it's in Singapore?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
in Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it has now been torn down. I think it's no longer there.
Yeah,
But-
it's abandonment. It has many horror stories and paranormal tales.
Yes. Crazy place. Crazy place.
Yeah, that's another thing I want to do is literally go and check out a lot of these places still.
But that's what I mean. If you, Gareth, what I was talking to Justin, while you're away, I said, look what we really have to do to truly understand the paranormal is to think outside the box. I mean, that's plain and simple.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that a million times, but I've never seen it happen. Most people seem to say they're safe within that box, and
Yeah.
there are the odd folks that do sort of venture outside that box. But I mean, it led me to try to understand what others think about, others from around the world and how they approach the paranormal.
Right.
Which led me
Now
to Sharif as one example in his group, among many others that I have spoken with and sort of shared ideas with from across the world.
We ran into this on Nocturnal Frequency a week or two ago, or maybe even this past week.
Okay.
Where you had guests on, who were great guests, by the way, and had great stories and all that stuff. But there was and even though I was on the show with you guys, I definitely bit my tongue on many occasions because I didn't want to push their buttons and get them
I remember
all stupid.
Yeah.
So there was a few times where I just sat there and said nothing when I could have said a million things.
Yeah.
Because they were bringing their own baggage to the game, right? They're their own perceptions. We had somebody, I'm not going to say any names, but we had somebody on a week or two ago saying that they would do cleansing over Skype.
Yeah.
and they would say, well, the spirits were talking to each other and they were having conversation. And I was sitting there in silence, not saying anything. But in my mind, I was thinking, this is such a bunch of bullshit.
It is.
And when I say it's a bunch of bullshit, I'm not dismissing the phenomena.
No.
At all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't doubt for a second that when they describe the phenomena that happened, I'm 99.9% sure that what they're saying really did happen.
Yeah.
What the issue that I have is that you start bringing your own baggage and explaining as to why this thing is happening.
I trust people to, who, let's say, mediums to an extent how they present things, and one particular experience I had was when someone told me that, I'm not seeing spirits. It's just information that I'm getting. That's the information. I was like, oh, really? He says, yeah, it's just information. It's how I perceive it, though. And I was just blown away by speaking to someone like that who was clear cut. While we've had a few people, and I was for sure understand where you're coming from, who clearly are definite and what is what,
Right. And for me, that's madness.
It's hard.
Right? Because
yes, it's hard.
Like I think I said this on the show is that you're seeing the effect, but then you're making up the cause.
Yeah.
Yes.
Filling in the gaps there.
You're manufacturing the cause. Well, now the effect that you're witnessing is very real, but you don't know what's causing the effect, so you just make up a bunch of shit.
And this is a lot of groups. And I agree with Steve, they talk about we think outside the box, but that outside the box is just like replacing Christianity with paganism of some sort. That's really the outside the box. When really the outside the box is open to the possibilities.
This is the soul of a little girl. How the fuck do you know that? How do you know that?
This is when things become very vain and you become very skeptical, Gareth. This is when your skin starts to toughen up, if you will. With the paranormal, I have closed up with a lot of stuff, and I'm very skeptical with a lot of stuff because I have to be. You have to be.
Yeah.
Very skeptical with a lot of what's going on within the paranormal now.
Being involved with it has made me, it really has made me skeptical, and just how people come out with their claims. Not, of course, in the phenomenon that's happening, but in just how the claims are presented. Yeah. And I've been through it, everything. People literally, calling just to get us out there because it's, the thing to do. Business who want to just, rise up their sales, and people who are genuine with what they're experiencing, but they just don't know. And you have to sit through all that. You can't just go there and expect everything to be one thing.
The phenomena is real, right?
Yeah.
And I can say that with authority because I've experienced it.
Yeah.
Right? I know it's real. There is something going on, but I don't pretend to know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is absolutely something going on, for sure.
If somebody says they know what's going on, there's a problem.
Dude, anyone who says they know what's going on is either a liar or a mental case.
Or both.
Right? It's one of the, because there's no fucking way.
Yeah.
They're either outright lying to your face or they're out of their minds, delusional.
I have been looking into this research, investigation, whatever, for close to 30 years now. And I would tread very lightly, if not at all, to say I know what's going on, because I have no fucking clue. None.
I agree completely, man.
I would love to know what's going on.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's just like everybody else.
I desperately want to know what's going on, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I know it's real, but I have no clue what's causing it. I mean, there's 1,000,001 theories and speculation and stories, but as to which one of those, if any, are correct, I have no idea.
Most are more plausible.
I had a guest on who had released a book about spirit photography, ghost photography, and they were making the claims that ghosts captured on camera.
Yeah.
Guaranteed, if you will, authentic ghost photography. And I'm looking at the book, and I'm looking at the pictures. I'm reading the book, looking at the pictures, and going, wow. Had the guy on the show, and I really, I'm not one to sort of, shame somebody on the show, sort of speak. I don't want to do that. But I'll let them have their say and let the listeners perceive for themselves. But I couldn't believe it. I mean, this guy who wrote the book, who took these photos and simply said, look at the proof is in the pudding. But I'm like, really? Are you kidding me? Are you really
it's
convinced of this? Seriously. Are you just pulling the?
But I hear it's very difficult though, Steve. When you have a guest on the show, who's I don't know, promoting a book or whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And they start going down a path where you immediately think like, well, this dude is obviously mental or bullshitting, right? But you don't want to say anything because you don't want to upset them or push their buttons, and so you have to kind of tread that fine line of, let's just get through the show. Let's just get to the end so I can get this retard off the air.
I've had a couple episodes, and actually I think one of the most recent ones I did, they have it. I edited a whole person out of the show. Well, for the most part, they might have been in there a little bit, but they brought some interesting claims or stories, I should say, to the show that was some personal stuff. And when I started listening, I'm like, maybe the stuff you're experiencing is trauma. Now, the only reason why I even continued the show was because the person that I had on was writing about a certain topic, and they had their wife on who was this person, and it was hard for me to kind of like say, hey, why is your wife on here talking about these personal stories? And they kind of laughed some stuff off, and I was interested. I kind of wanted to know more because of that, but having that involved and listening to how they were explaining it, was like, this is trauma. This is not, this is not them experiencing ghosts. This is some really, and what I cut out was some pretty heavy stuff. It was really heavy, and I was surprised they even let it continue. But yeah, I had to edit that out because it just didn't flow overall with what we were talking about. Besides that, it was ghost experience. But when I started to hear some explanations and certain things, I was like, whoa, this was way too much for just that show, and for me to even touch at that point.
It's difficult because, I mean, if you imagine, let's just imagine you had a hard-hitting political show, and when you would invite a politician on, you would lay into them and question them on every aspect. And even though what you were doing was legit, and you're asking legitimate questions that need legitimate answers, and the politician would get super uncomfortable and not want to go there, pretty soon you would have zero guests on that show. Because if your reputation spread, there's no way any politician would appear on their show, on your show, because they would know that you would rip them a new one.
It is hard.
It's the same with the with interviewing people in the paranormal, right? Because if you're hardcore and legit and asking real solid questions and putting these motherfuckers on the spot, if your reputation spreads, pretty soon they're going to be too scared to go on the show.
You'll just have a small niche. Maybe you'll survive, maybe, but most likely
they won't want to come on because they know that you'll rip their story to shreds.
I already know how some of that is, as it is with some close colleagues mentioning some things and not getting responses and stuff. And it's like, well, I can't really touch this, I guess, and it is hard, especially being involved so long. I think that's why some people that I ended up connecting with, we connected on a really good level, but certain ideas that I had, being skeptical about stuff, I could tell kind of pushed them away from certain things. And it's like having a black mark. I was like, well, he doesn't believe this. And it's not that I don't, I just question things, that's all. And it is.
But on the plus side, though, in the paranormal field, if you have that reputation, the guests that you do get on will be legit. Because they got nothing to hide.
That's
it's
true.
like, go ahead, ask me all the questions you want. I'm cool.
That's true.
But the ones who are a little shady, they will probably think twice about it.
And most are. I mean, that's why there's certain things I think we did fine with the David House, but I do want to do some documentary reviews, and I'll do the reviews in themselves.
Oh, the Demon House, that's on tonight. They're showing it tonight on Trail Channel.
Wow.
And you know what's crazy, dude? I know that you guys don't like Zach and you don't like the Demon House. I fucking loved it, dude.
Entertainment wise, it was fine. But that was it.
I thought it was great. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that shit.
These things, I mean, it's good to get it out there because it really points out a lot of things in itself. The people who believe in it, and of course the things as us who can sit here and kind of decipher what's going on. Because whole thing, if you pay attention, you'll start seeing the holes in that whole production.
Oh no, of course, yeah.
And it's great.
The way I look now. I'm a big fan of Ghost Adventures. I love it. I absolutely. I watch. No, wait. Let me finish. Let me finish my thought.
Let's get on.
I watch it I watch it every single week, and I enjoy it. Now, is it legit investigation or is it bullshit? At this point, of course, I could care less.
Yeah.
I absolutely could care less. I just enjoy the show.
Yeah.
If it's legit or if it's nonsense, I don't give a shit. I just enjoy watching it.
The burning fire that it is.
Yeah, it is. It's
I could.
It's like you know those people that listen to NSYNC in their car and then they talk shit about them.
Yeah.
Right. But in the car, they're all singing away to NSYNC, and then they're like, "Oh, fuck them, they're shit." Right. It's the same thing with Ghost Adventures, dude.
It's a love hate.
It's my guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. I enjoy the show.
I enjoy most of the shows for them just as that entertainment value. There's stuff I'll have on in the back. I even, as they would say, hate fuck certain things because I'm just like, oh, why? Oh, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Let me just whip on another episode so I can watch.
Like if you want to see if you want to see legit paranormal, well maybe legit is too strong of a word.
Yes.
But like almost legitimate or maybe legit, I don't know, paranormal TV, you got to go back to the mid 70s through early 80s.
Oh, of course.
But even so, is it legit?
Well, that's a good point. Absolutely. But if you go back to that period where you have In Search of and shows of that ilk that were done with a level of professionalism that's unseen today.
That's true. You're right.
If you go back to that, you like the mid 70s through like the early 80s, I think that's the golden age of legit paranormal shows.
Well, now it's just the Wild West, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Whereas
go
today,
mid-90s.
I mean,
Sightings.
Yeah, that's a good point, Justin. Yeah, Sightings was cool too. I really enjoyed that show.
I just watched an episode not that long ago, and we were looking at the Drake Hotel here in Chicago, and it's the people that don't rush to it or anything like that. The stories are really old, and they're nothing as new has happened if there was. But
hi, I'm Tim White. Welcome to Sightings.
It was the best the way they did it. We had two. What was it? The local news channel did a little 10-minute doc there for Halloween with some medium that was with the new owner. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's a different one. That's another story to tell. But they did was it a YouTube little doc of the place, and then eventually Sightings went there and did some stuff, if I remember correctly. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's the Excalibur. There we go, Excalibur, which is now called the Castle. They did these two different things. Sightings came in and did it, and the people that Sightings brought, although of course could be questionable, I felt more validated in watching that than whatever the local news channel put.
Do you remember? There's an episode of Sightings that blew my mind, and for years I tried to research it and find out where it was. It's an episode called The Ghost Rider.
That sounds familiar.
Do you remember this? This episode blew my mind. These two guys, they bought a house in the LA area. I've been trying to find out where it is, and I cannot find out where it is. Any listeners who know, let me know. And they moved into this house, and they started to do some renovations, and some paranormal phenomena started happening.
Yes, I know all about it with the Polaroid.
And he pulls out a Polaroid camera, and he takes a picture, and this weird mist comes out. He starts asking questions into thin air, taking a photograph with the Polaroid camera, and when the film came out, the answer to the question would be on the film.
Oh, geez.
Right? And this sounds insane. So he contacted Kerry Gaynor, who was a big-time paranormal investigator back in the 90s and from the 70s. He was with Barry Taffy. They investigated the Entity case. Yeah. And they sent a film crew over there with Kerry Gaynor, did a full investigation. And they said, well, look, we've prepared a Polaroid camera for you to use, which was like sealed, right? With the film in, completely sealed, completely tamper-proof. And they said, here's the camera. Now I want you to, ask your questions when the ghost comes and whatever. And they used this camera that was provided to them, and they still got the same result. And the investigators and they could not explain how they gave this tamper-proof camera to them, and they would ask questions to thin air, hit the film would come out, and the answers would be on the film from a tamper-proof camera. And that episode always, it stuck with me for years. It fascinated me.
That whole TV show is what really helped me kind of look at things differently. They had I forget his name, Peter something. He was a psychic that was on there. I ended up touching base with them, like I think during the MySpace days.
The guy with the gray hair and the black mustache.
Yes, great guy.
Yeah,
he really was.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
and we touched base on MySpace, and eventually he died. And I believe someone took over the account, and whoever I was talking to, I forget who it was. They just like, thanks, that you guys kept the whatever. But anyways, he was one of the main mediums when he would do his investigation.
The Alcatraz investigation
was great stuff. And not only that, they did stories where they started looking at it scientifically. There was a particular case that had all sorts of claims. They looked at the whole area, and then they realized, oh, you got power lines that are emitting high EMF radiation here. And from that point, I was like, wait a minute, is that a possibility that these are just, inducing these experiences? And that's what they were claiming, that it was that was causing the paranormal experience. And then there was another episode where they had a medium come on for this guy who was in jail for a period of time. I forget what it was. I want to say maybe he was in a prison that was shut down eventually, but I can't remember. Anyways, the medium went to the house.
Peter James.
Peter James. Yes, thank you. Peter James.
Peter James.
The medium went to this guy's old house because he said he had experience in that house, and she's following on. She's picking up stuff. And for a period of time, she's like, I keep picking up this person, walking here, walking there. And it's later on, I came in, she goes, it's you. I'm picking up you. And he goes, well, I was in jail. Because I think at some point people thought he died or something like that. It turns out something happened. He went to jail. So he came back out and wanted to look at these experiences in the house. But she was picking up his past energy, in a sense, of him stressing out, walking back and forth and doing these things. And he didn't know who she was talking about until she started mentioning some things. He goes, oh, that's me. And she started, not before that, she started getting a clearer version. She goes, this is you. I'm picking up you. And it just blew my mind the first time to see that, where I guess real time, kind of ghost information was being picked up. Instead of someone dying, this was someone that used to live there, and she picked up more of his presence than anything else. And it just, that TV show, seriously, if you guys get a chance out there listening, give it a chance again. Turn it up if you can find it. It's most definitely to watch. Yeah.
No, it was a really good show. I thoroughly enjoyed that show. That was in the early to mid '90s when that thing came on, I believe. Yeah, it was really, really good.
Maybe till '96. I think Sci-Fi picked it up for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it showed up on the Sci-Fi Channel, which it didn't last long there.
One of my
Peter
favorites.
James. Yeah, he was strange to look at because he had this crazy white hair and then a jet black mustache.
He reminded me of what's his face from Tombstone. Oh my God, I can't think of his name right now.
The Sam Elliott character.
Yeah, Sam Elliott. There
in Tombstone.
Yes. Great
That's
actor
right.
too.
Great movie. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of that really helped shape, my perspective on stuff. Was watching those old. Now, when I really got into it, Ghost Hunters came about, and for that first or second season, I was kind of hooked. But after that, it went downhill from there. You could see the change of what they wanted to do, and eventually, Paranormal State came on, and that first season, again, they went at it, and they were going at it more like a psychological perspective.
Right.
And next thing you know it, after that, demons from that point on, and then everything else follows suit right after Paranormal State with the demons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was happy about some of that stuff. It just, after watching it and being involved for so long, you're like, this is BS. This is total BS.
Let's talk a little bit about ritual.
Yeah.
I mean, ritual is a huge part of being human, right? We engage in rituals whether we know it or not.
Every day.
The so many aspects of human life is ritual.
Yeah.
That maybe we're even unconscious of.
Getting your coffee first.
Exactly.
Brush your teeth before this or that. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. But I think when you say the word ritual to most people, they think of some kind of religious practice.
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
It's tied into it. Like, a mass is a ritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that kind of stuff.
Communion,
Communion is a ritual, yeah, for sure. A graduation,
yep,
is a ritual. But you mentioned ritual earlier on, Justin. And I want to ask you about that. So, for you, just describe for me as best you can what the word ritual means to you.
In the shortest, it's just a habit. That's really what it comes down to. Some habit, something you form, on a periodic, some sort of time period where you have consistency to it. And that would be ritual for the most part. Like, again, brushing your teeth every morning. And in that side note, there are people who have to do those things before they start the day or their day crashes. Yeah. As simple as those things. So everything is that, just a repetitive, a habitual type of thing is a ritual. Something you do, picking up the toothbrush or picking up and writing down, your thoughts for the day. Those are the rituals, and that you have to do something in that sense for whatever period of time it may be.
So I remember going down this school of thought, and I remember talking to David Farrant about this, the Highgate vampire researcher from back in the day, and he was a Wiccan, and he was heavily involved in ritual in the mid to late 60s and the early 70s, with many groups, occult groups, and my perspective on ritual, and I remember talking to him about this, and he ultimately agreed with me, was that a ritual is a way to force your will upon reality.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing in these particular instances, one way or another.
You're bending reality to your will through ritual.
Yes. I think what it is, it's that layer of effect that you need for certain things to happen. Otherwise, they don't in that sense. And just, to also make it clear, too, a lot of those things are only probable. You can't expect it to happen right away, in those aspects. Not like brushing your teeth, because that is. Yeah, but in the occult aspect, it is only probable whatever you're doing will happen. And that's why you do it so many times, or, you have different variations of those things to achieve those types of, outcomes.
So what kind of rituals have you taken part in, and what has been the result?
Well, I mean, my first rituals was probably communion and speaking in tongues and stuff. But outside of that, I try to contact angels through the Inocuum workbook. I've done simple, magical rituals, and this is early stuff. I don't technically do this stuff now, and part of it is because I'm more on a thought level, and of course that's a whole discussion in itself on what that is. But for the most part, for me at this moment, it's more or less as simple as drawing, and we've talked about this before, drawing sigils, or meditation is a huge part of that as well. And of course, you have to set time for that, and put yourself in a mind frame to even get to that point to do those things. And even that is a ritual in itself, because you have to take time to clear your head and all that. So really, in that sense, it's that. It's a variation of everything you think. I've done candle magic. I've done, obviously trying to contact angels and stuff.
But has there been results, though, when you did sigil work, when you did candle magic?
Yes.
Has there been the results that you wanted to happen? Did it manifest?
In the beginning, no. Okay. In the beginning, no. But as I continue to experiment with these things, I started to see results in them. Some could be within a period of time of a day. Some could be a month to, I've even had a year later that I've experienced certain conclusions to those types of whatever I did at that point. And and that's the way it kind of, you can't expect it right away. And I think that's a lot of people who get involved in those types of things, or even any belief, have that we need to happen now. You got to kind of have to be patient, most definitely.
Just like the paranormal, it works on its schedule, not yours.
Yeah, pretty much. Unless you get a lot of people involved, and that's where things change. That's where I've noticed in groups of people in investigating, sometimes things seem to happen more. You may hear more sounds, or may catch more things, out of the corner of your eye and stuff, for whatever reason that may be. On smaller groups, I never really experienced that, but have experienced more things on larger groups of people. And having done certain things as a group ritual for occult purposes, in that sense, and I'm using that term loosely here, I've seen better results in that way. And there's explanation, because it's your intent involved, and because of that in itself is what made me question experiencing other things and other people experiencing those things. Because how much are we putting intent into to see, maybe a shadow person, or that person in those things? And because of that experience alone has really helped me find a grounding to really looking at, I guess, psychology in these particular experiencing claims.
Let me ask Steve, have you engaged in any ritual, and if so, what were the results?
Catastrophic.
Seriously?
He released Cthulhu and we didn't know.
Seriously?
No. I've been a few times, and I mean, nothing major has ever happened. I mean, a lot of subtle stuff, really. Nothing major to the point where, well, I'm never going to do this again, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were in an old farmhouse, and we did some Ouija board and crystal work, and it kind of paid off, if you will, to the point where it kind of gave us some sort of info onto the history of the house that we were in.
So it gave you relevant information.
Yes.
That was checked out.
Exactly.
Wow.
How many people were involved when you did that ritual?
3.
Mm-hmm.
3 people. 3 people.
And was it reoccurring at all? Did you end up doing it again, that particular house, that particular...
No. Unfortunately, the house was torn down.
Okay.
But nothing was force-fed. No information was force-fed towards anything. Whatever we received through the ritual was purely organic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never experimented with ritual to that extent. I remember years ago I bought a book and did a few things on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember becoming scared by it, so I stopped. When
we first did trying to contact, I know I did more, and that's the one thing that I can point out was being in the basement with my friend. We drew everything out and stuff like that, and there was that part of me that was like, is this really going to do it? Is this really going to happen? And there was a bit of scaredness from that. Of course, I personally haven't delved any farther into those types of things, and even doing that type of stuff requires a lot more time than me and a few friends spending a night, drawing circles and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that was another part too. I wasn't as informed I am now of those things, when I was doing those particular types of things. And of course, for me, I kind of graduated quickly into other forms after experimenting and being involved in certain circles. But most definitely, I think part of that deterred me as well was just not realizing how much it involves. And it does take belief. And that's the biggest part. Yeah, it does take belief.
Let's face it. I mean, the fear comes out of belief, if anything. how everyone was brought up to be. It's ingrained in your being, in your thoughts, and to push that envelope, the fear is in the belief.
Well, you start believing that it's real.
Yeah, you start believing what you're doing is evil.
Yeah, that's true too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
It's
not natural to do this. We shouldn't do this. And when you push the envelope, should I be doing this? The fear kicks in.
Yeah.
It's like the whole thing where, if an old lady who claims to be a witch comes up to you and says, "I curse you, you will die in 2 days," right? And you believe what she's telling you.
Yeah.
You will probably die in 2 days.
There's a possibility, correct?
Right,
yes.
But if you're like, this old bitch doesn't know what she's talking about, and you don't believe any of it, you'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. It really does take. That's why in certain aspects, when you do paranormal investigating, groups of people who believe more tend to see things more. It's every time I go and I'm like the skeptic in the group, everyone's seeing something, everyone's hearing something. Or on the flip side, if you're doing group ritual type stuff, most likely, as long as you're all in tune together, you most likely will get an outcome to what you're trying to do. And it's the huge part. That's what even kind of help look at things in that different life of belief, because that's where we're really at, is trying to understand how is this working, how does belief handle certain things. And it really was. I mean, we see right now talking in both these parts of this episode how things like that changed, and just looking at the same things changed our perspective. I went from believing in angels and demons to maybe this ain't what it is, to there's a possibility that the multiverse might bring these things about. And I mean, and it really has helped me get back into the saddle and really look at, because we're looking at consciousness. We really are trying to understand these types of things. We are. And you're not going to do it just like, oh, this exists and this exists, and
I was waiting for somebody to bring up the C word.
Is what we're doing.
No, absolutely. Consciousness is a massive factor, if not the key to the whole kingdom. But we've unfortunately run out of time again, guys. We've talked for almost 2 hours tonight. It's been wonderful. I want to thank you both for coming on. It's been a great conversation as always. We could talk for hours. We could do an 8-hour show. And
that's the way it usually goes.
I know, exactly. And maybe we will. But why don't you give out all your contact information, where people can follow you, reach you, and so on. Justin, where are you on the interwebs, and how can people find you?
Find me at the AnonymousRadioNetwork.net and on Twitter at LCGH or CrazyJ82.
Awesome. And Steve, where can people find you?
You can find the radio show Nocturnal Frequency Radio at newvisionsradio.com every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And SOPs, you can find on Facebook at facebook.com/SOPs Investigations.
All right. Thanks, guys. We should do this again. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
Most definitely.
All right. Take care.